Alright, so we open this back up. Let's pull this into our analyzer here. There we are. Alright, how tall are you?
5'8".
We'll reference you at 173 centimeters. Figure out that math. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to break down a couple key positions. So we're going to look at your balance point, your initial contact with your stride foot, your external rotation at your arm, and then your ball release and follow through.
Okay.
So if we take you forward here, I'm going to pause it at a certain time point. Alright, so here's our first one. I'm going to build them all out here quick. So if we keep going forward. There's our second one.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final announcement. Exos founder Mark Verstegen will be giving a presentation on the Exos methodology in the theater at Mayo Square. Please meet outside of the Mnpls and Link's offices right now, and you will be guided into the theater. Thank you.
And there's our fifth. Alright, so if you look in here, this is going to be your balance point. So when we blow this up, the reason we look at these distances here is we need a reference in terms of, if we're going to measure a distance, what it's going to be. So we're going to take a line from the middle of your back leg, straight vertical, and then we're going to draw a line from basically what we consider your center of mass, which is where, out the middle of your pelvis or your hips. Check out the distance between there. So that's about 14 centimeters. So in terms of when we look at high-level pictures, that's called your pelvic drift. Typically we see between 15 and 25 centimeters. And so meaning that your momentum is moving forward towards the plate. So it looks pretty good. Things are kind of supported there. You got good hip separation. When we look here, this is your initial contact point. So we're going to look at your stride length again as well. So the longer your stride, the faster or the more velocity you can get. So they directly correlate to each other. So we like to reference that as one of the key things we look at. So we look from the point your toe leaves to where your heel hits, 1.33 meters. So we look at stride length. And that equals your stride over your height. So for you, that's going to be 133 over 173. I don't think I can do that math in my head. It's too tough. It's going to be about 78%, I want to say. We'll check. 133, 173, 77%. That's close. All right, and in our elite pitchers, we like to see 77 to 90%. And the major league guys that are throwing really hard, you're going to get upwards of 90% pretty quick. And you need a ton of strength and flexibility to be able to support your body when it's that far extended out in front of you. I also look at your knee to see if you're flexed. So we typically measure that angle and also where your foot is landing when you first start. So for you, the biggest thing I would say of your mechanics so far is landing on your heels, providing kind of a big stopping impulse to your momentum. If we can get you down onto your toe, where you're accepting a little bit more weight moving forward,
okay,
then it's going to be a little bit more helpful. So when you land on your heel, so heel landing, you ask and we say yes, that kind of equates to a stopping impulse, meaning that you're stopping all that momentum you build up from your lower half, and at least 50% of your velocity comes from your trunk and your legs. And so you don't want to cut any of that off and slow yourself down.
So I should be using my lower body way more than my arm, right?
Well, at least 50% of the force of your pitch comes from your lower half, from your trunk and below. And so what we're looking at here is similarly when you run, when you sprint, you don't land on your heels for a reason.
Right.
You need to get your momentum moving forward and get over your toes. Same with your pitch. As you come here and drive out of your balance point, you want to be landing on that toe so you can transfer your weight forward. Instead of hitting hard on that heel, it's kind of a stopping of your momentum when you have to restart and generate all that force from your arm as opposed from your lower half.
Okay.
So that's probably the biggest thing I'd say so far is based on what we're seeing. But overall, mechanics look good. Heels down or your foot is down and your hand is above your elbow, which is one of the big things we look for. We don't want to see an inverted W, which is like a downward facing position. This is your Mark Pryor pitching motion towards his elbow up and into his career. Or we can consider an inverted L, which is again the hand below your elbow height when you get into this power position, that initial foot contact. So what we would name that would be stride foot contact or early cocking phase. And then when we look here, this is probably our least accurate of our motions because we need a camera that's about even with your elbow. What we look at is the maximum amount of external rotation your shoulder creates. So that's essentially this motion backward away from your body. So this is another one of those things that correlates with velocity. So major league pitchers, you're seeing this number in excess of 180 degrees. So that means they are not just flat, some of them are back behind the horizontal because they have tremendous mobility of their shoulder, but also the strength to support that. So you imagine if you're putting that much stress on your shoulder and your elbow every throw and they're not strong and stable, eventually you can just set yourself up for an injury if you're not really working at it. And so in this position, this looks good. Again, we can't measure it super accurately without being a little bit higher up. And that would be termed our late cocking phase. This is with the point in your throw that has the most injuries occur, both at the elbow and the shoulder. We look here, this is at ball release. So what we want to see is that that knee is, whoops, correct that there. So we want to see that your knee is flexed, but then as you release the ball, it's going to start to extend again. But you've got good trunk lean forward. So if we're looking at your upper body, you're starting to move toward the plate. We wouldn't want you bolt upright, because then you're stopping that momentum. You want to be transferring that energy out to your fingertips. So that's going to be your ball release phase. And then lastly, is going to be your follow through. And so typically when we do these in the clinic, whether it's for an injured individual going back to throwing or if it's someone for a performance program, we'd have a camera in front and you'd be throwing right over the top of it. So we get a good anterior view and look at, when you're landing, are you open or closed, where the angle of your arm is at, and then when you're follow through, seeing the back of your shoulder as we look at that follow through position so that you know you're not stopping your arm early. Sometimes you see those kids come back and they almost jolt their arm to a sudden stop. That puts a really, really high load on the back of your shoulder. So some guys that get really sore and they're posting your shoulder after throwing, I'd be curious if you watch them, if you see some of that early kind of stopping phase and they try and stop themselves from falling over or falling all the way through. And so that's what we really take a look at there. But you're nice and balanced. Like we talked about, your knees beginning to straighten up from the flex position at landing. And so we usually would kind of pull up that view there. And if I was looking from the front and I could see the back of your shoulder, I'd at least be happy that you're looking at it all the way through. So in terms of, from a mechanics standpoint, I think things look really good. I think your biggest gains to be had are going to be working on lower body and core strength to help work on elongating that stride. Practicing getting down to a toe on your initial stride or initial contact as opposed to a heel landing. Again, so we don't stop that momentum. So use all that energy you're storing from the bigger segments all the way up to the smallest one. So you think of it kind of like an upside down tornado. You've got all those big rings building to one small point. If you chop any of those off, you're losing those big chunks toward the bottom. Those are the ones that are most valuable. The wrist and the hand really just transfer everything to a final contact. So I think longer stride, getting out over your toe, and then making sure you're working on strength and stability and movement of your shoulder is all important stuff.
Okay.
You want me to email that to you?
Yes, please.